Okay, so it's good to hear that you guys have got some real-life heroes, and it's actually good to hear my mum and my girlfriend that some of you have got real-life personal heroes. I think that's an important thing too, and probably if we spent more time, you'd be able to talk about some of your personal heroes that you actually know. It's really cool to have a fictional, a favourite fictional superhero, and it's really cool to have a celebrity superhero like a singer or a sports star or something, but you've got to allow for the fact that being famous doesn't necessarily make someone a great hero. So I want to ask that question, which I think is on the next slide. Yeah, what makes a hero? Okay, well, when you think about the word hero, mostly, if you had a little bit of education or had opportunity to think about this, you'd associate the word with Greek myths and legends, wouldn't you? Although experts tell us that the word hero was probably around in some form before the Greeks made it famous. What I didn't know, and I found out just recently, is that these Greek stories, these Greek mythologies and legends about heroes started because of some extraordinary real-life human beings. So when someone, a human being back in the ancient Greek day, did something that people thought, that's extraordinary, that's not something that human beings do in their everyday, and when that person died, they would be made into a god. And so the idea of these people being heroes came out of the fact that these were human beings that did something that you just wouldn't expect a human being to do in the normal run of things. You'll know some of the names of the Greek gods. There's Hercules, the monster killer, Asclepius, if I'm saying that right, who was the first doctor, Dionysus, who was the creator of Greek fraternities, that's like unions or professional support groups, and then this one, Jason. What have we got? We've got Hercules, Asclepius, Dionysus, and then you've got Jason. Like they ran out of really great Greek names to give that one. Anyway, Jason, he was the leader of the Argonauts, and he led 50 heroes in search of the Golden Fleece. Our Greek heroes weren't always good. There's Oedipus and Medea, but they were always extraordinary, or they'd always done something extraordinary. But I want to ask about today. What about today? Who do we say a hero is? Now, these words up here are my attempt to capture what you told me last Sunday and what some of you have said on Facebook. I'm not going to go through them all, but you can have a read at them. Things that you might expect, like resilient, persevering, enduring. A couple that surprised me, but I thought, well, wise, was a creative, and someone, I think it might have been Jackie, again wrote that a hero uses their resources at hand to deal with the situation. A couple of you said that heroes know us. And a couple of you were very pointed about that and said, heroes know us so well, says Ray Scott, he's not here today, that they bring you chocolate cake. And Kylie Howe said, heroes are people who know you so well, they bring you coffee in the morning without talking to you. I thought that was an interesting one as well. I think Simon said heroes are humble. And actually Simon's dad joined in too. And he talked about the fact that heroes are necessary. Did I put that up? I think so. Yeah. I thought that was a very interesting comment. And actually, your responses were very impressive because then after I'd done that, I went to some of the formal official surveys and definitions, and here's some of the things that I found. So heroes are perceived to be highly moral and highly competent, usually both of those together, and there's 8 traits that they're believed to possess. Heroes are smart and strong and resilient and selfless and caring and charismatic and reliable and inspiring. You can see a reflection of some of your words. Not necessarily all of those things, but a good hero will have a lot of those things, they tell us. Here's another one. The most typical features of heroes identified in the research done by these people are bravery, moral integrity, they're courageous, they protect, they're convicted, they're honest, they're altruistic, self-sacrificing, selfless, determined, they save, they inspire, and they're helpful. And then a group called Heroic Imagination Project, which is a not-for-profit group that actually teaches ordinary people how to be heroes. This is their definition of a hero, and I think it's a really good one. A hero acts voluntarily and intentionally in the service of people or communities in need at some type of personal cost or risk and without the need for recompense or gain. Well, that's a pretty good definition. But actually, I can see how the Bible writer Paul might have been describing a hero when he wrote these words. Those of us who are strong and able in the faith need to step in and lend a hand to those who falter, and not just do what is most convenient for us. Strength is for service, not status. Each one of us needs to look after the good of the people around us, asking ourselves, how can I help? I'm struck by that verse in relation to this idea of defining heroes. Okay, so we've got some ideas about what makes a hero. But the next question I want to ask is, why do heroes matter? Or maybe there's a follow-up question to that, is actually, do they matter? You know, it's fun, you've got your favourite superhero, you've got your mum and people you admire, but does it matter whether or not we have heroes? Well, the short answer to that is, I'm told, yes. And as I say, I am told, you don't have to take my word for that. The experts from all sorts of fields, psychology, anthropology, theology, sociology, anything you can think of, they say yes, that we need heroes. And there's a whole pile of reasons we need heroes, but I've compressed it into two groups for ease of communication this morning. And so they say we need heroes for our well-being, and by that I mean spiritual, emotional, physical, mental, all aspects of our well-being. And we need heroes so we can be better people. So let's look at this first one first. We need heroes. Have I gone to the right one there? I think I've gone too far. There we go. Beautiful. We need heroes for our well-being. Okay. Now you can see there's a few things there: physical, emotional, mental. I've mentioned all those things. The physical aspect's easy to understand, isn't it? You know, a hero assists me with my physical well-being. One of my favourite stories of this sort of example of a hero who made a physical difference to someone is the story, I think it's probably about 10 years old now, happened in America on the subway. An older man in his 50s with two little girls. His two little girls was on the subway. Wesley Autry, his name was. And he saw a much younger man in his 20s actually have a seizure right on the edge of the platform. And he fell into the train tracks just as a train was coming. And the guy was having the seizure, and so Wesley Autry jumped in, but he couldn't get him out. So he lay himself down on top of this man and pressed down on top of him while 5 carriages went over the top before the train driver, who had seen it, but before he could stop. I mean, that's a pretty good example of being a hero in a way that made a physical difference. And they were both fine. The older man's two little girls were a little traumatised, but you know, there's some emotional, psychological well-being needed to be dealt with there. Okay, but what about the other ways that I mentioned? Well, essentially, heroes and heroic actions, and importantly, the stories of heroes and their heroic actions, they change the way we feel. So I guess that's the emotional bit of this well-being. When someone does something heroic for us, and we hear of something heroic, we feel a mixture of awe and reverence and admiration, and psychologists call that elevation. We experience elevation. So we feel, we have this emotional response. We feel love, we feel warmth, we feel calm and peaceful when we recognise someone has done something that is beautiful, that is good, that is morally right in some way. And then, of course, you'll see these groups aren't really standing alone, but the next category is that there's the relational and spiritual impact of heroes and their stories, because for as long as they've been human beings, we've been sitting around something, a campfire, a table, whatever, and telling each other stories of heroes in our own family, in our own communities, in our own world. And these hero stories, they're just so important to us because, well, they connect us to each other to start with. You know what, we've got some hero stories in our family, and they remind us that we are a family unit. So they connect us to each other. But they also reinforce our values, and they reinforce what we think about the world and God and work and everything. So heroes, you know, they actually reinforce action and behaviour that is good and right, and that has an impact for us relationally and spiritually. Now, as I said, you can see how these categories of well-being overlap a little. They're not really separate from each other. But let's think about the way that heroes and heroic actions shape us mentally or psychologically and spiritually. They all roll in together. See, heroes can help us calm our fears. Heroes, they kind of help us take a breath and carry on. So many of you described heroes as people who are strong people and people who persevere. One of you said, a hero is someone who stays. I loved that. A hero is someone who stays the course and sees the thing through. And somehow, in all the strength and persevering of a hero, they pass on resilience and strength and perseverance to us. And my mum has been a hero, Diane, in my life. And in lots of different ways, lots of stories to tell there. But I remember once, years and years ago, Hayden and I were involved in a church that was going through a really tough time, and we were part of the leadership team, so we were carrying a really heavy load. And we'd walked in the door of our home, our children were little, and I hadn't said anything, but Mum read my face and could see on my face, obviously, that a fair bit of hurt and heartache. And I can picture it now. She walked across that family room and she hugged me fiercely. It was like, oh, okay, Mum. And she said some things that I'm not going to repeat because they're not characteristic of my mum, and I'd hate you to think badly of her, although maybe you'd think better of her if I told you what she said. She said something that made me go, oh, okay, Mum. And she communicated to me very, very clearly that she was sorry for our pain, and she was quite cross with those that she thought were causing it, and she would give whatever practical help she could manage as we walked through it. And she did. My mum was working full-time, but she and Dad, they helped look after the kids. They helped us in a whole pile of ways, practical ways, so we could get to meetings, get into conversations and deal with what we had to deal with. You might be saying, oh, that's a pretty small act of heroism, Karen. No, some of you don't think so. But I can tell you without a doubt that it was my mum's own strength and perseverance on our behalf. It did cost her. She had a busy life. She worked full-time. She was a pastor's wife. It cost her in lots of ways. And that gave me the strength and resilience to see the thing through. You see, when a hero stays the course and makes something wrong right, it gives us hope that things will be okay. It helps us see that we can, one, get through the tough times, but I think more importantly, when a hero stays the course and shows us perseverance and strength and resilience, it helps us be okay with the fact that the tough thing might stay or might be for a very long time, but there's still hope and there's still good things in that space. Okay, so we need heroes for our well-being, but we also need heroes so that we can be better people. And there's two aspects to this. Here's the first one. I think I put it up on the screen, yep. So you've heard this already. I've kind of said it. As I say, lots of overlap here. But we need heroes because they model behaviour that upholds our values. And assuming our values are good, and therefore their behaviour is good, it's a good thing for us to copy or to be inspired by the behaviour of our heroes, to help us become good and better people. But the other aspect of this thing here too, about why we need heroes, is that we actually need heroes to help us deal with complex things that we might not actually learn without heroic type experiences and stories. Many of you, I'm sure, will have heard of Richard Rohr, who's a bit of a spiritual guru. He's a Franciscan priest, written a lot of stuff on spiritual formation. And he says that we can't understand the often contradictory truths that we need to grapple with as we grow and develop without hero stories. So he says, truths like failure is part of success. What does that mean without a story around it? Or how do you get that without a story around it? Sometimes you have to leave home to find home, or we need to lose ourselves in order to find ourselves, or surrender to win, or give up something important to gain something important. They're complex truths that we make better sense of or make sense of around stories. It's why we tell children fairy tales and make up stories of villains and heroes. One of our granddaughters is living with us at the moment, and her favourite bedtime story is a story about Grey Fox, made-up story about Grey Fox and Little Fox and Baby Fox, and they live up the back of our place, in case you're wondering. And they get into all sorts of scrapes, and they get saved and helped and rescued by their friends who actually live in our house, in case you're wondering. They come down the hill, they knock on the door, and, the stories are full of a whole pile of, oh no, moments. That's what she'll actually say, oh no. but they're also full of a whole pile of it's going to be okay moments. And you've got to be careful, you don't terrorise small children. But it's a natural part of an important part of our development. Heroes and heroic acts and hero stories, they make us better because of what is modelled and because they do help us process complex truths. Okay, and the second aspect of how heroes can make us better people is this. We need heroes to show us that we can dig deep and change. Just like most heroes do, if you stop and look at a hero story, whether it be Grey Fox or someone in history or someone that you know personally, you'll often see in a good hero story that the hero themselves has to dig deep at some stage, doesn't he or she? And has to change at some stage, get over a fear or learn a skill that they don't naturally have. A hero has to be transformed in some way. They have to dig deep to find the courage or the wisdom or the creativity or compassion they need to do the heroic thing, to make an intentional action in the service of people or communities in need, even though it costs them something and without any thought of personal gain. Heroes have to dig deep and be transformed themselves so that they can do the heroic thing. And then we are inspired ourselves when we experience that in some way or see that or hear stories of that. We're actually inspired to be transformed and changed, to become ourselves braver or wiser or kinder, to be our better selves. Okay, now over the next couple of weeks, we're going to talk about what can make each one of us a hero, and look at what God's story tells us about how each one of us can be a hero. And we're going to talk also about some very practical, heroic actions we can make as individuals and as a community of Jesus followers. And there'll be plenty of stories about real-life heroes that I'll be sharing with you. Some that are people that are known personally to us and alive today, some from history or other parts of the world. And actually in the 5 p.m. worship gathering over the next, not tonight, but the next 3 Sundays, we've got people are going to tell us their own stories of a time they were the beneficiaries of a heroic act, or perhaps a time that they were involved in something heroic, and they're going to tell us the story, but then explain to us how it changed them in relation to Jesus. So you might want to get into that space over the next few Sundays, 5 p.m, you're very welcome to. But as we finish today, I think we should talk about someone who is a hero amongst heroes. Someone who sets the gold standard for what it means to be a hero. Now, looking around, I'm guessing most long enough to know who I'm talking about. And probably if you're a visitor here today, you're in church, you probably get the answer is going to be something to do with God or Jesus, right? Okay, the answer is definitely Jesus. And we're going to watch a short version of the story of his heroic life on the screen now. Thanks. I thought that was a pretty good version of the story of hero Jesus. And did you notice in the telling of that story some of the things that we have identified as being important in defining who a hero is? So Jesus willingly and intentionally chose to act on our behalf. He didn't cling to the equal status that he had with God as God. No, when the time came, he set aside the privileges of deity and he took on the status of a slave, becoming human. So he willingly and intentionally chose to act on our behalf. And he acted in the service of all humanity. These very familiar verses, probably to most of us in this space today. This is how much God loved the world. He gave his son, his one and only son, and this is why, so that no one need be destroyed. By believing in him, anyone can have a whole and lasting life. God didn't go to the trouble of sending his son merely to point an accusing finger, telling the world how bad it was. He came to help, to put the world right again. And anyone who trusts in him is acquitted. Anyone who refused to trust him has long since been under a death sentence without knowing it. And why? Because of that person's failure to believe in the one-of-a-kind Son of God when introduced to him. So Jesus willingly and intentionally acted on behalf of all humanity, in fact all of creation, And he acted at great and, in fact, for us, unimaginable cost. He became a human, and he stayed human. And it was an incredibly humbling process. He didn't claim special privileges. I tell you what, I would have again and again. Instead, he lived a selfless, obedient life, and then he died a selfless, obedient death, and the worst kind of death at that. A crucifixion, willingly and intentionally, in the service of all humanity, at great and, in fact, unimaginable cost, and without any thought of personal gain. And you know what? Unlike any other hero you can think of, even your fictional ones, he did this perfectly. And he did it for us. So at the beginning of this series, I want to ask you, what do you make of this hero, Jesus? Is Jesus your hero? Some of you will say yes, without a doubt. And then I want to say to you, if that's you, if you're yes, I'd wear the Jesus t-shirt if there was one. Then I'm going to invite you to come to the next part of the service intentionally, with your heart full of gratitude and thanks, actual thanks, sentences of thanks that you want to make in your head or your heart, or maybe say out loud to someone sitting alongside you. Express your gratitude for what Jesus has done as your hero. When I ask that question, is Jesus your hero? If you answer no, if you answer not yet, or if you answer even maybe, but I'm not really sure, and that's okay too. You're welcome to be part of this next part of the service. And I guess what I'm hoping and praying for you is over this next 4 weeks, that the things we talk about will actually make a space for you as you sit in that no, not yet, or maybe space.